circumcision in Bechuanland, on the shamefully low intake of women in the legal profession, on the scandalous discrimination against girls in higher mathematics. Leaflets were circulated, articles written, meetings addressed, and as the 20s moved into the 30s, and the canker of fascism arose in Germany and Italy and Spain, women were urged to declare themselves against Hitler, with his dread doctrine of Kinder, Kirche and Kirche, which threatened to put them back into the Middle Ages. But it was during this decade that something disquieting began to be felt in Gowan Terrace, a development as unexpected as it was difficult to deal with, and it concerned Charlotte's only daughter, Ellen. None of the Norchester sisters had intended to marry, but in the year 1913, a brave and beautiful woman named Emily Davison threw herself under the King's horse in the Derby to draw attention to the suffragette cause, and was killed. It was at her funeral that Charlotte found herself standing next to a good-looking gentleman who, when she faltered, for she had loved Emily, took her arm and led her from the open grave. His name was Ellen Carr. He was a solicitor and sympathetic to the movement. They married, and a year later their child was born. It was, fortunately, a girl, whom they named Ellen, and Alan had time to dote on her and spoil her before he was killed at Ypres. The baby was enchanting, plump and dimpled with blonde curls and big brown eyes, the kind of person found in paintings leaning out of heaven and bestowing laurel leaves or garlands on deserving mortals down below. What mattered, however, was that she was clever. Every possible kind of intelligence test proclaimed that all was very well, and her mother, Dr. Carr, and her aunts, Phyllis and Annie, spared no effort to stimulate the little creature's mind. The girl, at least, should not struggle for her opportunities. Oxford or Cambridge were a certainty, followed by a higher degree, and then who knew? An ambassadorship, a seat in the cabinet. Nothing was out of Ellen's reach. So they did not at first feel in the least alarmed. All little girls picked daisies and arranged them in paste jars, usually in inconvenient places, and Dr. Carr, bidden imperiously by her daughter to smell them, duly did so, though the scent of daisies is not easily perceived by someone accustomed to the strong odours of Lysol and chloroform. It was natural for little girls to bake buns, and Ellen, perched on a stool beside the usually morose cook general, with her curls tied in a handkerchief, was a sight that her mother and her aunts could appreciate. Children made little gardens and planted love in a mist and forget-me-nots, and for Ellen to claim a patch of earth in the sooty square of ground behind the house, which all the sisters were far too busy to cultivate, was natural. But children's gardens are generally outgrown, and Ellen's little patch extended until she had cultivated a whole flower bed, and then she found cuttings of honeysuckle and clematis and trained them to climb up to the first-floor windows. Then again, there was the question of the maids. It was of course all right for children to help servants. Servants, after all, were a kind of underclass and should have been liberated, except that it wasn't easy to see how to run a house without them. But it soon became clear that Ellen enjoyed making beds and polishing the grate and setting fires. They would find her folding sheets and putting her nose voluptuously against the starched linen. Once, when the maid was ill, they came across her with her school uniform hitched up, scrubbing the floor, and she said, "Look, isn't it beautiful? The way the light catches the soap bubbles." Did she perhaps do altogether too much looking? The sisters had read their Blake. They knew it was desirable to see the world in a grain of sand and eternity in an hour. But the world in a scrubbing brush? The world in a bowl of fruit? "Perhaps she's going to be a painter," suggested Aunt Phyllis. A great woman painter, the first female president of the Royal Academy. It was a possibility. But Ellen didn't want to paint apples. She wanted to smell them, turn them in her hands and eat them. Other members of the sisterhood were called in, honorary aunts to the child, and consulted. Aunt Delia, an inky lady who ran the Left Book Club shop in Gower Street, and the headmistress of Ellen's school, a full-bosomed and confident person whose bottle-green girls were the most academically motivated.